Hello, welcome along. This is Good Morning Transfers. Just 2 days remain in the January window. But in the Saudi Pro League, well, the deadline is today. So will Al Shabab be able to get a deal over the line to sign Newcastle's Miguel Almiron? Well, West Ham could sign a defender and a winger before Thursday, as David Moyes looks to add to his squad. And yesterday, well, it looked like Antonio Nusa was on his way to Brentford, but is that about to change? There is loads happening today. Here's what is coming up on this morning's show. First, we'll have the latest on Miguel Almiron's future. At 9:15, an update from Brentford and from West Ham. At 9:30, we'll have news from Tottenham. Then at 9:45, we are rolling back the years with transfers that happened on this very day. Yeah, a very good morning to you all at home. Good morning to Dan Bardell, Olivia Bazaglo and James Sabundra as well. You all OK this morning?
Very good, thank you.
Very excited. Very excited to be here. Right. Loads to talk about. We're actually going to start with some fresh news from West Ham this morning. We understand they are considering a bid worth more than £15 million from Lyon for forward Said Benrahma. Marseille also understood to be interested. Now, we understand that ideally West Ham, they want to bring someone in before actually allowing Said Benrahma to go, and are exploring potential deals for Al Ittihad forward Jota and for Nordsjælland's Ibrahim Osman. We're going to bring you more on that story as we get it. We're going to chat about West Ham in depth as well a little bit later on in the show. But we're going to start by talking about Newcastle this morning, because I said it a minute ago, we might be a couple of days away from the deadline here, but it is deadline day in the Saudi Pro League. So what does that mean then for Miguel Almiron? James, I'll start with you. It feels like this is a bit of a kind of race against time now if he is to go to Al Shabab.
Yeah, it feels that way. Transfer window closes at 9 p.m. tonight UK time when it comes to the Saudi Pro League, and it means that Miguel Almiron's future is likely to be decided one way or the other today, because Al Shabab are the only club that are reportedly interested in signing Almiron in this window. And we know that Newcastle have to sell to potentially bring players in. So he's emerged as the most credible option for Newcastle to sell in this window. So Saudi Pro League clubs need to conclude their business today. Eddie Howe spoke yesterday. It was quite interesting what he said. He said they're waiting to see what happens in regards to transfers. He didn't want to speak about individual names, but he did say keeping the squad intact is my priority, but also respected the fact the club may need to move players on to try and fit within PSR constraints. He missed the game against Fulham on Saturday due to illness. He may return tonight against Aston Villa. So we wait to see over the next few hours whether or not Miguel Almiron goes. I think at this moment in time it looks more likely than not that he stays. But of course, as we know, when it comes to transfer windows, the closing hours of a window, that anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen. James mentioned Eddie Howe talking yesterday in his pre-match news conference. Let's just remind you of what he had to say about Almiron's future yesterday.
We are waiting to see what happens. I don't want to talk about individual player names. I don't think that's right. Yeah, so that's what I say.
If you are to add, do you need to lose someone?
Yeah, I think it's a complex situation, so I don't think anything's clear-cut. All eventualities could happen. Probably what we won't do is bring a player in without losing one the other way. I think that would be impossible. But I think all other options could still happen.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see what does unfold over the next couple of days. I mean, nail on the head there from Eddie Howe. They need to sell in order to bring anyone else in.
Yeah, and as James said, it feels like Almiron's almost the best loss that they could have, although on the face of it, you know, they don't have many options down that right-hand side. But other players have been linked with moves away. They haven't come to fruition. I think for Newcastle, they really could do with bolstering central midfield kind of immediately. They've been decimated by injuries through the whole season, but the central midfield area at the moment is a huge, huge problem. The midfield at the weekend was Miley, Guimaraes and Longstaff. But other than that, there was no other central midfield option, even on the bench. You know, no Joe Linton, no Tonali, no Anderson, no Willock. So they've got a hell of a lot of bodies missing in the middle of the park at the moment. And with that high-octane football that Eddie Howe plays, that the high press, the high-intensity sprints that go into central midfielders' games in particular, you know, the load on those three players has been an awful lot over the last few games. If they sold Almiron, that would allow them to dip into the transfer market, and I think personally it would be in that central midfield area where they'd look to operate and get somebody else in to help them out. It's unforeseen circumstances, really, isn't it, for Newcastle and Eddie Howe? They spent a massive amount of money on Tonali in the summer. He hasn't been able to play for the reasons that we all know. He was their showpiece signing in the summer, and he hasn't been able to play. So Newcastle, in an ideal world, would be able to bring in a central midfielder, perhaps if they got rid of Almiron, but the clock's ticking. Doesn't look like there's much time left or that it's going to happen.
Liv, down there talking about central midfield being an area they need to look at, but if Almiron leaves, what are their winger options? What do they currently have in the squad?
Yeah, they don't have that many when you think about it. Obviously, Harvey Barnes was a big one of their big signings. He's closing in on a return from injury, but again, he likes playing on the left-hand side. You've got Joe Willock that can also play on the left if they want him to. Anthony Gordon has been absolutely brilliant, again, on the left. Now, Almiron is that player that's been playing on the right, and when you look at those options, not many of them. You know, Jacob Murphy can play there if Eddie Howe wants him to. But I think the point Eddie Howe was making in his news conference was the fact that they don't actually have, or he's had to play players that aren't natural wingers as wingers. You know, Livramento came on as a winger. Now, Livramento is a brilliant fullback, and you know he's a brilliant player that he could do a job on the wing. But in terms of natural right wingers, Miguel Almiron really is the only one they've got. So you think if they lose him, then surely they need to get in a replacement, because otherwise you are then playing players. And listen, those players are good enough to play on the right. Of course they are. They're wingers. They can swap wings if they need to. But when you looked at those options on the screen, all of them pretty much are left wingers. So Eddie Howe could be left in a real sticky situation if they do decide to sell him to Saudi, because then what are they going to do with that right-hand side?
Yeah, you make a good point. I'm going to come back to Newcastle in just a moment, because there's plenty to talk about. But a little bit of breaking news, a couple of pieces of breaking news, actually. First of all, Crystal Palace, in the last couple of minutes, have announced the signing of Daniel Munoz from Genk until 2027. That is with an option for a further year as well. The fee Crystal Palace are paying for him, we believe, is around about £8.5 million. Got some quotes from the player as well. He says, "It is a pleasure for me to be here at such a historic club, such a big club as Crystal Palace." Sorry about that. I'm very excited, very happy, and I can't wait to be on the pitch. I think it's a dream come true for me, and I hope to be up to the task. Also got some quotes as well from the Palace chairman, Steve Parish, who has said, "We are delighted to welcome a player of Daniel's quality and character to the club. He has experience at the highest level for club and country, and he possesses an impressive record going forward for a fullback. I'm certain his ability, athleticism and tenacity will be a huge boost to the squad for the remainder of the season and beyond." So some good news for Crystal Palace fans this morning. They have announced the signing of Daniel Munoz from Genk. A little bit of news as well coming, sticking with West Ham, actually, could be another outgoing, because Nottingham Forest are exploring a deal to sign forward Maxwell Cornet. Forest are understood to have approached West Ham over a loan move. It is thought that West Ham will look at suitable offers for Cornet, and his contract runs until 2027, with the club holding the option to extend for a further 12 months. So it feels like there is a lot going on with West Ham at the moment. I mean, you're actually at West Ham, James, on deadline day. Well, it could be a busy couple of days leading up to it, but a busy day for you on the Thursday.
It could be. It's been a good window for them already, bringing in Calvin Phillips, but now it's a case of they're trying to find somebody in that wide forward area, which does mean that the likes of Cornet and Benrahma could be allowed to leave. For Cornet, it's not really worked out since joining in 2022. He signed for Burnley. He was so impressive at Burnley before the end of that season. Unfortunately, they went down. But Benrahma, it's not really quite worked out for him at West Ham. Sent off in the FA Cup against Bristol City. He's not had the impact which I thought many fans thought he would have after being so brilliant at Brentford, playing alongside the likes of Mbumo, alongside Watkins as well. The BMW, they were so brilliant in the Championship. It's not quite worked out for him there, and they are looking to bring in a wide player. We know there's issues there in terms of who they may be able to sign in that area. Centre-back, they might bring someone in as well. David Moyes said that they'd like to bring players in. They've recruited brilliantly since they've lost Declan Rice, and you back them to do something similar. But yeah, it could be a busy day for me on deadline day as West Ham look to get a squad that can compete in the Premier League. 6th in the table at the moment. They want to try and retain hopes of qualifying for the Europa League or maybe even the Champions League next season. And, of course, they are in the knockout stages of the Europa League too. So all things are looking pretty rosy at West Ham, and it could be an exciting few days.
Yeah, it feels like things are really sort of ramping up now, doesn't it, with a couple of days to go. Right, let's get out and about now, and let's head to Burnley. We can join our reporter, Vinny O'Connor, who's there for us. Vinny, hello, good morning, good to see you. What's the situation at Burnley then? Will there be any incomings or outgoings before that deadline on Thursday?
Well, it looks like there could be incomings, and it could be a centre-half as well. Maxime Estev, there's a potential deal there for around £10 million, although Montpellier obviously want to keep hold of the 21-year-old. He's been capped at under 21 level. He's got 2.5 years to run on his contract as well. And there have been other clubs interested. We hear reports that there have been bids so far rejected for him as well. But when you consider that Burnley have conceded, 42 goals so far in 21 Premier League games this season, then it probably makes sense for them to strengthen at the back. Only Sheffield United have conceded more in the league so far this campaign as well. Also wonder whether there's potential to bring in another attacking option with the injuries to Redmond and Koleosho as well. They've been linked with a move for Millwall's attacking midfielder Roman S. So, as I say, potential for Burnley to be active in this window before the window shuts.
Well, and that's transfers then. Away from that, there is a huge game against Manchester City tomorrow night, as, of course, Vincent Kompany returns to the Etihad.
Yeah, going back to the stadium where there's a statue of him, of course, and back there last season in the FA Cup, they were beaten by 6-0. It was 32 minutes, actually, before they conceded the first, and then another 25 minutes or so after that. 27 minutes later, Erling Haaland had completed his hat-trick. They lost 3-0 to Manchester City at home earlier this season, of course, as well. Again, Haaland on the score sheet with a couple on the Friday Night Football. That was the first game of the season as well. Injury means that Haaland hasn't played since the 6th of December and that defeat to Aston Villa, but potential for him to be back for Manchester City, just Vincent Kompany and Burnley's luck, really, isn't it? And Burnley on 2 Premier League wins in their last 14 Premier League games at the moment, 4 draws, 10 defeats in that time. Both sides then desperate for points for very different reasons, aren't they? Obviously Manchester City looking to re-exert themselves in the title race once again, while Burnley looking for points to desperately try and avoid the drop. In terms of what the squad's going to be looking like as well, I think we also need to take a check on Charlie Taylor, Jordan Bayer, Sander Berger, Aaron Ramsey and Han Delcroix as well. So plenty to speak to Vincent Kompany about, and we'll hear from him around about 10 o'clock this morning.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Vinny. Right, a reminder of the breaking news this hour then. Crystal Palace have signed Daniel Munoz from Genk for £8.5 million, and Nottingham Forest are exploring a deal to sign forward Maxwell Cornet, while Said Benrahma could also leave West Ham following a £15 million bid from Lyon. More reaction to those stories to come here on Good Morning Transfers. welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Time now to take a quick look at some of the stories making the back pages. We're going to start with the Times this morning and to a player's future that it feels like we've been talking about all month, Conor Gallagher, because the Times report this morning that Chelsea are willing to sell the midfielder for the right price this month. And finally, The Sun reporting this morning that Leeds have made a loan offer for Everton defender Ben Godfrey. And that rounds up some of the stories making the back pages this morning. A little reminder for you as well, if you are out and about today, you can keep across all the latest deals and transfer stories as well on our Transfer Centre blog. Just scan that QR code you can see on the screen right now. If you are just joining us as well, by the way, well, Crystal Palace, they have made a signing this morning. Daniel Munoz, you can see at the bottom of your screen. He has joined from Genk for £8.5 million. And we told you earlier on in the show about a couple of potential outgoings at West Ham in Maxwell Cornet and Said Benrahma. Nottingham Forest want Cornet, while it's Lyon who want Benrahma. And James, I mean, it feels like things are really ramping up. West Ham actively looking now to move some players out.
Yeah, they are, especially in that wide forward area, because I think ideally they'd like to sign somebody, potentially an upgrade, David Moyes and West Ham field, to the current two players you mentioned there, Benrahma and Cornet. So we know they looked at Ibrahim Osman, they're looking at Jota as well. Issues with both of those deals at this moment in time. Just over 48 hours to go left in this transfer window. So it feels like West Ham have got a lot of work to do to get rid of a player and to bring somebody in as well. I think ideally they'd like to bring in a wide forward before they let either Benrahma or Cornet go. It's not quite worked out for either player. Cornet only managed his first Premier League goal for West Ham last weekend against Sheffield United. For Benrahma, a lot of excitement about his signing, considering what he's done at Brentford. Not really worked out so far for him either. So I think West Ham, if they could get good value in this window and move him on to potentially Lyon or another club, that would make a lot of sense. And for Cornet, it just hasn't worked out. There's been a number of injuries he's had as well, but he's never quite been in favour. We know David Moyes would like to bolster this attack, and the question he'll have and what he'll want to do is go out of this January window in a better stage than they went into it at the end of December. And I think bringing in Calvin Phillips was a brilliant move for them. If they can just add a little bit extra quality in that area and then offset it by removing someone from the wage bill and getting a decent fee, then that would mean a very good window for a club that look like they're in a really good place at the moment.
Yeah, James mentioned a couple of those names, potential incomings. Just to bring you up to date, West Ham have not given up on signing Nordsjælland forward Ibrahim Osman. However, there is a significant gap in the valuation between what West Ham are prepared to pay and what the Danish club want. And as it stands as well, it seems like there is a bit of a stalemate. So West Ham continue to look at other targets. James mentioned him. One of those, Al Ittihad forward Jota. Dan, is Osman, it feels like someone we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. Is this someone that West Ham fans could really get excited about?
Yeah, and I won't make my Leon Osman joke for the ninth time.
Well, that was done 2 weeks ago.
In the last 7 days. I think I've just expanded a little bit on what James was saying. I feel like West Ham now are almost approaching a crucial stage on their journey and evolution as a football club. So, you know, the likes of Cornet and Benrahma, maybe not quite good enough to go to where West Ham's next destination is, and that's becoming a consistent top six team that qualifies for Europe and progresses in Europe. We've seen with the players that they signed in the summer, the likes of Kudus and Alvarez, players that have got European big match experience. And Osman will have that as well of playing in European competition. So it's almost like West Ham now are at a different stage of the journey, and that they're looking to recruit in a different manner to maybe what they've done in the last 5 years or so in the Premier League. So he's a young, exciting talent. It's a case of moving maybe an older player on to get a fresher, younger, exciting player in on the wing. I think that's what West Ham are trying to do at the moment. And I've said previously as well, if you're signing a young player when you're in a good place, that player doesn't need to come in straight away. They've signed Calvin Phillips on loan because he ultimately knows the Premier League and he can come in and do a job for them immediately. With Osman, there's not a need to throw him straight into the cut and thrust of the Premier League. He'll be able to progress at his own speed and progress, hopefully, with West Ham, so that maybe next season he's got that half a season under his belt, gets a pre-season under his belt and gets ready to attack next season. Yeah.
Another player they're looking at the other end of the pitch, we understand that West Ham are keeping an eye on Trevor Chalobah's situation at Chelsea. And Liv, when I saw this story, I think, wow, I forgot about this guy.
Yeah, I think everyone has. Obviously, he hasn't played a single match this season because of a reoccurring hamstring injury that he suffered back in August. I still think, had he maybe have been fit, I'm not sure he would have been a first choice under Mauricio Pochettino. He's still really young. He's still 24 years old. And, he made 33 appearances for Chelsea last season, 30 the season before that. Now, he made a few mistakes, but a young centre-back, right-back, is going to definitely make them. But overall, I actually thought he was actually very good. And I think the telling point was when Chelsea bought in Disasi. I don't think Disasi's been any better or worse than what Chalobah was over the last couple of years, but it does look like that was almost like a replacement before Chalobah had potentially even gone. You look at the other options, you've got Fofana, who's coming back from a long-term injury, but he's been pretty good, and you'd probably think he would be ahead of him. Thiago Silva obviously might leave at the end of the season, but again ahead of him, Badiashile and Levi Colwill as well. So there are plenty of options there at centre-back for Chelsea. And we know the Chelsea owners, since they come in, have been open to selling players for pure profit. That's the reason why Armando Broja and Conor Gallagher have really been the only two Chelsea players everyone's been talking about potentially leaving this window. Now Trevor Chalobah as well. So it wouldn't be surprising. But for someone like that, I actually think he was pretty good over the last 2 seasons, and he deserves to be playing first-team football, I think. And I think West Ham would actually be a really good option for him.
That almost sum Chelsea's recruitment up in some ways, almost recruiting for the sake of it when there's already a capable player there, and you're saying Disasi's no better or no worse than Chalobah. It's almost like that they are recruited for the sake of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's happened multiple times as well. When this Disasi move happened, I was a little bit confused because I personally, having watched Trevor Chalobah over the last couple of years, thought I was actually really impressed for someone that was a centre-back but was having to play as a makeshift right-back in his first couple of seasons for Chelsea. I was actually really impressed. And Disasi's come in and, some games I've actually watched him and thought, he's actually been pretty good. But other times I've been like, Chalobah could have done equally as good a job. So it's obvious, we know the owner's strategy by now. They've been doing it since they came in, and this transfer window, I think, again, has just proved that is the way they want to go. They want to sell players for pure profit, and it looks like that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's Chelsea's perspective then. As for West Ham, why do they want him?
Well, they're a defender down at the moment. You consider Thilo Kehrer went to Monaco earlier on this window, so there is a vacancy in that area at the moment. But as we mentioned just before, signing a wide forward would appear to be the priority for West Ham in this window. But you can see why West Ham would be interested in bringing Trevor Chalobah to East London if the price is right, crucially. He hasn't played at all this season due to injury, but we can look at what he's done so far in his time at Chelsea, having made his debut, actually, for them in the Super Cup under Thomas Tuchel. Featured for Tuchel, Graham Potter and Frank Lampard, particularly under Tuchel in this season here, when he was particularly successful being part of a Chelsea defence, where they kept 9 clean sheets that season. We know the issues they had last season, but he was still an important player, regardless of who the manager was. We can see that with 25 Premier League appearances last season. And whilst Chalobah has the ability to play as a full-back and a holding midfielder, his stronger position is at centre-back in either a 2 or a 3-man midfield. And here we can see West Ham's current options in that area. Now, Kurt Zouma, Nair Fagard have been the preferred options used by David Moyes in that area, but Konstantinos Mavropanos has also been given opportunities as well. Started the last 4 Premier League matches when Aguerd was injured, and he's been away on African Cup of Nations duty as well. Now, Angelo Ogbonna is clearly the backup choice, though he did help West Ham secure clean sheets in his last 2 appearances, including one at the Emirates against Arsenal. So based on that, signing a centre-back isn't an absolute priority, and there's a question as to whether he'd be able to dislodge Aguerd or Zouma. But we've seen the benefits that Fikayo Tomori and Mark Gay have seen from departing Chelsea after coming through the academy. So does it feel like, regardless whether it's West Ham or somewhere else, that now could be the time for Chalobah to move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the perfect time for him to move on. And I think someone, as good as him, he's been doing it for Chelsea in the Premier League. I don't care what people say. If you've watched him over the last couple of years, he has been pretty good. And like you say, you want to be playing regular football as a 24-year-old. And I think he's got the capabilities to be playing in plenty of Premier League teams. And I'm surprised, actually, that West Ham are the only team in for him. Maybe it's the fact that he has been injured for the whole of this season and he hasn't played a single game. So that could be the reason. But I think West Ham would be a great place for him to go.
Yeah. Another line to bring you as well, by the way. Real Betis are now working on a permanent transfer for West Ham midfielder Pablo Fornals. Betis, you might remember, were initially looking at a loan deal. I mean, James, you were going to be there on deadline day. It feels like this could be one of the busiest clubs.
It could be because they're looking to offload players as well. Yes, they got the Declan Rice money, which so many people speak about, but they've spent a lot of money now bringing in midfielders. The Calvin Phillips deal isn't cheap either when you consider the loan fee and the wages with that as well. So I think the club are being judicious. They're looking at players that aren't featuring, and when you look at the number of minutes Fornals has played, around 400 I think in the Premier League this season, it's not been quite as successful as West Ham would have hoped. His contract's drawing to a close as well, so it does make sense to try and offload players, and I think Dan's right. They're in a position now where a lot of these players were signed with West Ham towards the bottom of the Premier League table when David Moyes came in, and with previous managers as well, but now season by season they're evolving. They're becoming a team that they're now getting used to being in great positions in the league. Last season was a bit of a disaster in the Premier League, but of course they did so well winning the Europa Conference League. But now they want to be a top six club on a regular basis. So a lot of the clubs that they signed with respect now probably aren't those that are going to take them in the next direction. Newcastle in a similar situation as well. They signed players towards the bottom to get them up to mid-table, upper mid-table. Whereas now they're looking for players that can take them on to great things in the Champions League rather than riding a mid-table.
Yeah, you make a really good point. Right, that's West Ham then. Let's get to Brentford now. And this is a really interesting story because yesterday it looked like Club Bruges' Antonio Nusa was on his way to the West London club, but a deal to sign him is stalling at the moment, and that is due to complications with the medical. It's now sort of reopened the door to other clubs. Tottenham and Chelsea, you might remember, they have been interested in the player this window as well. James, it's sort of one of those deals. Last week we were saying, right, this is going to happen imminently. Well, he was linked to Tottenham to begin with. Then we thought Brentford was going to happen really quickly. What is going on?
Yeah, it's pretty complex, this, and Lyle Thomas from our news desk has got more details on this. Brentford and Club Bruges, they're doing further due diligence on his fitness today, and this move to Brentford is now in real jeopardy because Brentford have detected potential issues in his medical, which he had yesterday, and now they're considering their options. So they remain hopeful they can still sign the player, but it's unlikely they're going to do so under the current terms that have been agreed. So the door has now been reopened, as you mentioned, to the likes of Tottenham and Chelsea to explore it again. So he will return to his club in Belgium. There remains a chance that he does remain a Bruges player for the rest of the season, and we know the deals that clubs are exploring, the likes of Chelsea, Tottenham and Brentford. It would have actually been a deal where they sign him in this window, but then he goes back to Bruges for the remainder of the season. So around 48 hours, a bit more to go in this transfer window. Nusa may remain a Bruges player in this window, but there's still so many clubs interested in him. So we wait to see what happens after Brentford have done their due diligence.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, isn't it? Obviously, James has mentioned there that whoever was looking to sign him from the Premier League, the idea was to loan him back to Club Bruges. He is an 18-year-old that is being signed for potential. Why is he so sought after?
Yeah, I mean, he's already been signed for potential once. He signed for Bruges in 2021, so when he was 15, 16 years old. So he's been a player that will have been on the radar of clubs for a long time. I think from a Brentford perspective, we know in the summer they were after a forward of that type of profile, Brennan Johnson, Nico Gonzalez. Brentford were in for both of them, and neither of those moves got over the line. So we know that Brentford want a wide forward. This is a player that's known for his ability to take on defenders. And it's interesting with Brentford because I believe he's got a good camp around him that want to make sure he doesn't necessarily move to the biggest club. He moves to the right club. Bruges was the right club for him at that stage of his development, and it seemed like they'd identified Brentford as the right club for him at this stage of his development. It was thought that Tottenham might be the front runners at one point, but Brentford have emerged over the last week, and it looked like that was a deal that was going to happen. So hopefully he gets his move. Hopefully this anomaly is sorted out and he gets a move, because he sounds like a really, really exciting prospect. And I've always admired Brentford's recruitment. It does feel a very Brentford signing, doesn't it? And fair play to his camp as well, because we've seen players jump and take that big step too early. It seems like a bit like Haaland, where instead of going up to the massive club straight away, and Bellingham, they went and had a year at Dortmund before they made that massive move, or more than a year at Dortmund. It felt like they had this in plan for Nusa, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, still a few days left to get this sorted, but I hope he makes his move.
Yeah, bit of a wait and see with that one. Well, it is a busy morning already here on Good Morning Transfers. On the way for you, we've got news from Aston Villa, from Tottenham and from Brighton as well, so don't go anywhere. Hello, welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Now, this is a part of the show where we cover 5 teams in 5 minutes. So get the stopwatch out. Dan, kick us off. Aston Villa.
Yeah, you know I like to be snappy when it comes to Villa.
Real snappy from you.
Morgan Rogers still seems to be the number one on Villa's agenda. Third bid's gone in to Middlesbrough. Obviously, we've known for the last few weeks, really, that he's a player that Unai Emery and the Villa recruitment team have agreed on. It's now just about agreeing a deal with Middlesbrough. On the face of it, do Villa need him? I'm not sure, but I trust Unai Emery in his judgment. You know, what he says goes. He's got full control of the football club. Worrying story yesterday about Jacob Ramsey that I know we're going to touch on more in this afternoon's show, but I can't see that happening. One, I can't see how Newcastle are going to be able to afford Jacob Ramsey. Two, I can't see why Villa would let a homegrown player like him go, someone who really is the poster boy for the academy. But we know that teams are struggling with PSR. Villa could be one of those teams potentially that are close to the line, so maybe stranger things have happened, but I don't see Jacob Ramsey leaving because Villa are fighting on 3 fronts at the moment. Got a very real chance of getting top 4. And although Jacob Ramsey's been injured all season, if he's fit, he'll be a big part of that.
Thanks for being really snappy. Got about 20 seconds left to cover the other 4. Leah for Crystal Palace, who've had some good news already this morning.
I'll do Crystal Palace. I'll take that off you. Really busy morning. Well, Daniel Munoz coming in, attacking right back, something they don't currently have at the moment with Klein and Ward being more defensive options. They've been bidding for Blackburn midfielder Adam Wharton, so that's something that could potentially happen before the end of this window. It's an interesting deal that Palace are looking to do there because you'd think they'd maybe want Premier League experience rather than signing a 19-year-old from the Championship in the position they're in at the moment. And they actually turned down an approach from Nottingham Forest last week to sign Sam Johnston on a loan with an obligation to buy. And there were some interesting comments from Roy Hodgson in regards to Michael Elise yesterday. We know he signed a 4-year contract in August. That's after Chelsea activated his release clause of £35 million. But there are already reports that he may be on the move this summer to Manchester United. And Hodgson said it'd be a sad day for the club if he leaves. I'm certain the club would like him to honour his contract and improve the team. We want to make the team stronger, not lose players to other Premier League clubs who've got money on the table. I think I did that in a minute.
No, you didn't. That was longer than me. Right, South Coast is for you. You got Brighton and Bournemouth.
Yeah, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, Brighton are after him. He's one of those players that's in the Championship, but I think he is a Premier League player. 9 goals and 9 assists in 27 Championship appearances this season. Of course, Leicester are flying high at the top of the Championship, and they're obviously in pole position to get back into the Premier League. Are they going to want to let Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall go? But it would be a smart signing for Brighton, I think, under De Zerbi. As for Bournemouth, it looks like David Brooks is potentially going on loan to Southampton. He was actually the best player on the pitch for Bournemouth in their FA Cup win over Swansea. But he's come out and said himself he wants to get first-team football. He wants to get back in the Wales squad, potentially, if they get to the Euros. They've got a play-off in March. And another player, Romain Fav, could be coming back to Bournemouth on loan. He is currently on loan at Lorient. He scored 5 goals in 17 matches the first half of the season. But people say, he's had a good sort of first half. But apparently there is a breakdown, reports are suggesting, in the relationship with the Lorient manager. So that's potentially why he could be coming back to Bournemouth.
Nice. Right, we are still under the 5 minutes, believe it or not. So I'm told anyway.
That was snappy,
you were brilliant.
Thank you.
These are the guys. Fulham, Dan.
Sorry, I'm still thinking about Villa. What's the night? Fulham are obviously lacking strikers, haven't really replaced Mitrovic, and there's been a bit of talk around strikers leaving the club, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Jimenez and Carlos Vinicius are there, so it's just a wait and see one for Fulham. I don't think they're going to do anything in this window in terms of incomings, and it doesn't look like they're going to be doing anything in terms of outgoings either.
All right, brilliant. That's 5 and 5. We need a little clock on the screen, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Just so you can't get away with this. Right, let's talk about Tottenham now. And they started the window with a couple of early signings. One player that will not be going anywhere, though, is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. His representatives told Sky Germany yesterday that he will stay at the club until at least the end of the season. James, it has been a sort of a month of departures, really, when you think about some of the, experienced heads, the likes of Lloris going, Dyer, Perisic as well. Quite a number of players have sort of returned from loan spells, then gone out on other moves. Where are you at with this Højbjerg situation?
Well, according to his representatives, he's going nowhere in this window, and we've spoken a lot about his future and where he may be off to. 18 months left on his contract. It doesn't feel like he's as pivotal to Spurs under Ange Postecoglou as he was to Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte. But recently, because of the injuries they've suffered in that area and with the players on African Cup of Nations duty, he started their last 2 Premier League matches, started in the FA Cup as well against Manchester United. So I think Spurs are quite relaxed about the situation. I think in the long term, they would love to upgrade a player like Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and sign a younger player with more potential, somebody under the age of 24. That's what they've looked to be doing in the previous transfer windows since Postecoglou's come in. So I think if they can upgrade him in this window, they would. I don't think they'll let him go unless they do bring in a replacement. And unlike with the likes of Eric Dyer and Hugo Lloris leaving the club on relatively small fees, but they weren't part of the future. They didn't really have a first-team squad. They didn't have a chance of playing it in the first team. Whereas when it comes to Højbjerg, he's still quite important at the moment. So they're relaxing it. They don't want to let him go unless they can bring someone in. And with time ticking, it seems unlikely they'll get someone they want before now and the end of the window.
Yeah, I mean, they moved sort of really swiftly, didn't they, to get a couple of players in. Then things have gone a little bit quiet. Obviously, they had those strong links to Nusa. That seems to have fallen away. See what happens over the next couple of days. But, I mean, what do they need at this point?
Tom White will like this answer. Nothing. I honestly don't think Tottenham need anything. They acted really efficiently and diligently at the start of the window to get 2 players in, identified 2 positions that perhaps needed cover and competition, and got Dragusin in on a permanent, and Timo Werner, who I think was a smart pickup on loan for the second half of the season. I think what that tells me is that their recruitment's going well under Langer, who's joined from Aston Villa, because they've obviously identified Werner as a short-term option. They'll go back in the summer and look at the striking options again. They obviously didn't feel that there was anything too fruitful going to happen. They wouldn't be able to get in the type of player that they desired in January on a permanent basis. So they've acted and got someone with Premier League experience, someone with European experience to come in and provides competition all across the 3 positions in their front line. So I think Spurs have had a really, really efficient and strong window. And I think if you add anything else into the mix, I don't really think they need it at the moment. So I think well done to Postecoglou and well done to Tottenham, because I think so far, a little bit by default, they're winning the window.
Liv, I mean, Conor Gallagher is a player who's been linked to them for some time now. Brought that paper story earlier saying that Chelsea, they would be willing to let him go if it was for the right price. I mean, it looks unlikely that he'd join Spurs at this point. Yeah,
I mean, Spurs have admired Conor Gallagher since the start of the window. There is a reason why Spurs want him. He's a unique player. He brings something different to a central midfield. Of course, his contract does expire at the end of next season, so it puts maybe Chelsea in a more sticky situation in the summer, perhaps. But Mauricio Pochettino has come out pretty much every single news conference when he gets asked about it, that he doesn't want him to go. You know, he's been captain for the majority of the season with Reece James and Ben Chilwell out, even when Thiago Silva's been on the pitch as well. And I think it's pretty clear that the player doesn't want to go. And I think, even, Chelsea, that report was suggesting that Chelsea are willing to sell if the right price comes in. I still don't believe we're in a situation where Conor Gallagher accepts this deal. I think he's going to stay at Chelsea because he wants to be a Chelsea player. But like you mentioned, James, the options at Spurs are interesting, and they probably could do with a player like Conor Gallagher because, like you say, Sarr and Bissouma are quite clearly their first choice centre midfield pairing, and they are brilliant together. But if, Bissouma's already picked up 2 red cards this season, if he picks up another one, or if something happens, maybe one of them gets injured, and you're looking at Højbjerg and Skip as the only 2 players for cover, that's not necessarily good enough, I think, for where Spurs want to be this season. So you can understand why they want Conor Gallagher, and it doesn't look like they're going to give up until the end of the window. But I think with all things considered, I don't think he's going to be leaving Chelsea in January. Yeah. James, Dan saying there that Spurs are sort of the winners of the window. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Well, they went into the window with 3 areas they wanted to try and strengthen, and centre-back was a real priority area, and they brought Dragusin in before halfway in this window, and left wing was an area they wanted to improve in as well. While Timo Werner isn't maybe a natural left winger, that's where he'll probably play for Spurs, and that's a no-risk option in terms of the fact he's on loan to the end of the season. There's an option to buy. We wait to see if they'll take them up on that offer or not. And then centre midfield, we spoke about that as being an area I think it would be a perfect window if they upgraded in midfield in this window. But also they're restricted in terms of what they can spend. They'd probably want to offload a player to bring one in. And I think also you mentioned the players they were able to offload in this window, the likes of Hugo Lloris, Eric Dyer as well. Sergio Reguilon's gone out on loan to Brentford, and Ashley Phillips, that would be a great opportunity for him out on loan at Plymouth. Javit Tanganga going to Millwall as well. So they've trimmed down the squad. I think the aim, as you always have as a Premier League club, is you want to come out of that window in a better place than you went into it with. I think Spurs fans can't argue with that. I think it's been a really good window.
Yeah, well, a couple of days left in this transfer window. One signing made today. That is at Crystal Palace. Daniel Munoz has joined the club from Genk. Next, we're going to take a little look at signings made on this day. We'll also reflect on Virgil van Dijk's quotes around his Liverpool future. And welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Time now to take a look back at some of the moves that happened on this very day. There were some pretty good ones, weren't there? James, kick us off.
Going to go back to 2013, 11 years ago on this day. Philippe Coutinho joined Liverpool from Inter Milan. Fee of around £8.5 million. A brilliant spell for him on Merseyside. More than 200 appearances, more than 50 goals as well. Didn't win any silverware, unfortunately, but there were some great memories that he created over the course of his time at Liverpool. And, of course, they sold him to Barcelona for around £130 million. So I don't think you get better than that when you talk about PSR rules. I'm sure plenty of Premier League clubs would love to offload a player for £130 million. Special memories from the Brazilian. Sadly, things haven't quite worked out since then at Barcelona. Of course, Aston Villa as well. But at his best, just incredible to watch.
Yeah. Well said, well said. Liv, your one?
Yeah, I've gone slightly more recent. Bruno Guimaraes on this day a couple of years ago signed from Lyon to Newcastle for £40 million. And it was sort of that January where they brought in Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn. And I think alongside Kieran Trippier, he's probably been one of Newcastle's best signings under this new ownership. He's one of those players that you absolutely love if he's in your team.
Yeah.
And you absolutely
hate him if he's not.
He's not, but he has been absolutely brilliant. He's, of course, like an ever-present in that Newcastle side now. And, one of the best signings under the new ownership. And I think, we've only really seen the start from Bruno Guimaraes. So.
Yeah, those couple of years have gone quick, actually, when you think about it. Dan, what was your pick?
Yeah, Gary Cahill.
We knew Villa would be in there
from
Love
Villa.
him.
I think Villa fans are still a little bit hurt by this one. It stung for a long, long time that Martin O'Neill decided that Gary Cahill was surplus to requirements. He burst onto the scene a little bit, scoring early on in his Villa career against Birmingham City with a great strike, lovely technique, a bit like Olivia striking a water bottle underneath the desk. And he's just a great footballer. Look at what he's gone on to achieve in his career. Liv knows that he's won everything at
He signed
Chelsea.
in January, didn't he, in 2012, then went on to win the Champions League 4 months later, and then he went on to win everything there was to win. So.
Yeah, good leader as well. It was a sad one because he came through the Villa Academy, and Martin O'Neill deemed him surplus to requirements, and I'm still not sure why to this day.
Yeah, three brilliant on this day signings. Going to say Coutinho wins, I think.
Just about, but Gary
Just
Cahill was
about.
a great move for him, and eventually goes to Chelsea, as Liv said,
after as
jumping
well.
on Dan's spot, went on to win everything there is to win.
There we go. Right, let's move on. Chris Wilder says his side are working frantically to get some more deals done before the window closes. Sheffield United, of course, the Premier League's bottom side, 7 points at the moment from safety, and Wilder very much looking to bring in players with experience.
It is vital that we have someone that has played in the division or has played in a level that is equivalent to the Premier League. We talked about it when we first looked at bringing players in, players that make us better or stronger as a group. We are as well working frantically to improve our group, and hopefully we'll do that before the window shuts.
Right, that is Sheffield United then. Let's talk about Liverpool now, because a few days on from Jurgen Klopp's surprise announcement that he'll be leaving the club at the end of the season, well, yesterday, some quotes emerged from Virgil van Dijk, the club captain, where he admitted he isn't sure whether he will be part of the post-Jurgen Klopp era. And he says that the club's hierarchy have a big job on their hands to replace Klopp. James, look... Yesterday, you saw these quotes come out, and it's just not what you want to hear if you are a Liverpool fan, because there's just, further uncertainty around the club now.
That's the word, uncertainty, and Virgil van Dijk did little to, I guess, confirm that he will be at Liverpool long term. I guess he didn't say he was going to leave either, but I think Liverpool fans are looking for a bit of reassurance after still coming to terms with the news that Jurgen Klopp will be departing at the end of the season. That's not what they wanted to hear. Their talismanic defender who's done so much to them over the course of the last few seasons. The fact that they're now thinking about life after Klopp, and they're now thinking there may be an exodus with his first team. And it's natural for players to be linked with the clubs. We know Mohamed Salah was linked with the move to the Saudi Pro League in the summer. I'm sure that talk will come back up once again. I think there's no time to panic, but when you look at players like Van Dijk, who's got 18 months left on his contract, a few other players in that situation as well. There are players whose contracts end at the end of this summer, but perhaps players not as integral to Liverpool at this moment in time. It's an interesting situation they're in at the moment. There will be naturally a new manager will come in with his own thoughts, but you don't want to have too much of a transition. And I think Liverpool fans will be hoping they can keep on to their best players, because it's been such a brilliant start to this season. They're still in full competitions. I think the focus has got to be on the end of this season, winning things, rather than worrying too much about what might happen in the summer.
I do think, actually, when you look at that Liverpool squad, it's not going to be left in the work. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp is going to be a huge miss. And like we say, we've seen the effects of Sir Alex Ferguson leaving Man United and Arsene Wenger leaving Arsenal. But in terms of, the players, Jarrell Quansah's come through, Ibrahim Konate's young, Conor Bradley was brilliant in their FA Cup win. And I do think this Liverpool team, despite some of the big names perhaps maybe leaving in the summer or whenever they do go, obviously, they have to get this managerial appointment next right. I mean, Liverpool fans will say the only person they want to replace Jurgen Klopp is Jurgen Klopp. And obviously that can't happen. So, but I look at their squad and they've still got some brilliant youngsters, even if they do let perhaps some of their more experienced players go. But obviously, the next appointment is obviously huge.
And they have coped in the absence of players that have gone in the past.
Yeah.
We mentioned Philip Coutinho before. I know that was a long time ago. But especially in the front three, Mane and Firmino, they can do it. And that midfield is already being transitioned. It's Liverpool 2.0 in that midfield, because they had a revamp of that area last summer. So whether players leave, as long as the board and the scouts are doing their due diligence, they will sign players who can keep Liverpool moving in the right direction.
I think it's just when you hear the names of sort of Van Dijk, you don't know his future. Salah, throw Trent in there as well.
Yeah, and I think the other difficulty is, what order do you recruit the manager and the sporting director, and who's actually making those decisions? Because, they're going to be without a sporting director in the summer, and at the moment they're going to be without a manager as well. And FSG, we've always thought of as smooth, clinical operators. This is a difficult juncture for them now.
Yeah. Right, loads more to talk about. We'll be back at lunchtime. A little reminder for you as well, obviously just a couple of days to go in the window. Good Morning Transfers back at the same time tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock for you. Plenty more to come from us today. Transfer Talk, that is back at midday here on Sky Sports News. And then a full roundup of all the day's news. You can catch the Transfer Show at 5 and then at 6:30. Bit of a change of time for that one, so make a note. The Football Show is next here on Sky Sports News. We'll be building up to all of tonight's Premier League games.